Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Flizanes, your Empowerment Strategist, producer, and winemaker. Thank you for downloading today's episode. So today is another solo show. I was going to publish the Rewire results from the last Rewire group in September of last year. I'm very excited to share that with you because we had some great breakthroughs and life-changing things happen, but I need to postpone it till next week because of what is happening right now in my world during Awaken Your Dream Life. So Awaken Your Dream Life is a 3-week course that is currently going on right now as of the recording of this and as of the listening of this, if you're getting it on the day that it publishes. And what has come up has just sort of gotten me on fire. And today is a full moon. It's January 25th, 2024. It is a Thursday. It is a full moon in Leo. And I just wanted to share this really powerful information now because it's dedicated to those of you who are doing Awaken Your Dream Life. And it's also dedicated to those of you who are considering either doing a sacred shamanic ceremony with Christian and I at the end of February, or doing a VIP mushroom journey with me on your own, or potentially joining the Rewiring Your Core Wound Pattern program that's going to start in March. And even if you aren't considering any of this, this is still important information for you. So today we're going to talk about the feelings hiding beneath the surface. What has come up today for many people is this idea of, I don't resonate with that, and I don't think I feel that, or I don't think that's me. And one of the members of the beta group, actually the Rewire group, was telling a story, and I'm going to credit where credit is due. So I'm talking about Jane. And Jane had brought up that she has a friend who is a Ayurvedic medicine woman and a yoga teacher, healer, and has her podcast and was sort of out of commission for 18 months because she found out she had uterine cancer. And she wrote a book about it, and she's now speaking about it. And that sort of hit home for a lot of people and for me to want to share with you kind of this idea that we started talking about last week with the subconscious, unconscious mind and our conscious mind. And even though I talked about the 4 ways to reprogram your subconscious, and the first line was hypnosis or binaural beats, and I know we talked about one of them was having a super life experience, right? And that was what I was crediting sort of the plant medicine to help do. The plant medicine, and I have to share that I really feel strongly about what I'm doing right now and the fears that I have had about sharing what I'm doing right now, because I was a super no drug person. I barely ever smoked pot, like maybe 4 times my entire life. The first 2 were terrible. The next 2 were better. But I never was, and it wasn't until after college. It wasn't until I was living on my own in California. Like, I was someone who didn't need or want to be altered by a drug. Now, yes, I drank wine, and that's something I guess I felt comfortable with, and that was fine. But any kind of smoking, snorting, injecting, like none of that. I was never interested in any of that. And as you know, if you've been listening for a while, the stories that Dr. Nasha would tell me about the mushroom journeys and psilocybin with cancer patients, and then, of course, watching How to Change Your Mind with Michael Pollan, really turned the corner for me. And so while it is a substance that the government looks at in a threatening way, it is a plant. And the power of these plants is really amazing and life-changing. So I want to tell you a couple stories to illustrate that you might be sitting in a position that says, no, that doesn't resonate. No, I have no problems. No, I don't really have any negative feelings. Most of us, again, that 12% of your conscious mind does not recognize the 88% of your subconscious mind. Now, this is a story that a lot of you may have heard before, but I'm going to repeat it for anyone new, and just so this conversation makes more sense. Back when I was with an ex-boyfriend and we were together, I observed that I was behaving differently than I had behaved in previous relationships. There was something that called my attention to observe my behavior and say, it looks like from the outside, JJ, that you feel he's going to forget you. Like, you're concerned, you're worried, you're afraid that he's going to forget you. So you're doing all these things right now to almost anchor your memory in his subconscious, in his life, so he never forgets you. And I said that to myself, and I thought about it, and my logic brain said, no, that's ridiculous. I have the 5 reasons why that makes no sense whatsoever. I felt very, very, very strongly that idea did not resonate. However, I noticed my behavior. I noticed that my behavior was weird and different. And again, as an observer in my own life, it called attention to me. But then when I evaluated it and I really sat with it and I thought about it and I pulled it into my body in that moment, I was like, no, that makes no sense. I knew that he threw away all of his favorite girlfriend's stuff to replace it with mine. And again, maybe that's where this whole fear came into play, of knowing that that's how he acts and that's what he does. So maybe I felt like I wanted to satisfy and secure my spot in the favorite or best girlfriend, situation. So I acted this way. But again, in my mind, there was no way. That didn't make any sense for all these different reasons. And then I laid down on the bed and I was doing a binaural beat program, and those little tones hit my brain, and across the screen on my forehead that said, "Are you afraid that he's going to forget you?" It dropped down, it hit my gut, and I started to cry. And in that moment, I knew I did believe that. Oh my God, I am afraid of that. Now, I couldn't find it in my conscious brain. I didn't know it was there. In fact, I thought there was no way it could be there. But then when I allowed myself to be open, and I wasn't even expecting this. I wasn't going into the binaural beats trying to find anything. I just laid down doing the binaural beats. I don't even remember why I did them. But I remember having this epiphany and then having this emotional response. That let me know that there's a part of my brain that isn't connected to the emotions that I'm storing in my body, that my subconscious is holding things that I am unaware of. So now I'm going to move back to Jane. Jane did the Rewire beta group. And on a one-on-one call with her, I was explaining how on a podcast with Dr. Mindy Pills, when she interviewed me, I got in such a flow with her about oxytocin and epigenetics and quantum physics that I made a statement in the flow that I later regretted. And because I knew that if I told you guys, people who listen to me regularly, and maybe this is your first time listening, and if that's the case, I'm sorry to assume, but those of you that know me and feel me, you would hear it the way that I mean it. But there are people who would not hear, especially people that don't know me. And so I hurried up, and after it was over, I said, holy shit, I don't want her to publish that. Can she please edit that out? So I'm explaining to Jane, who is a cancer thriver, what I said. And I told her. And I wasn't telling her for her, or I wasn't telling her for any other reason, just sharing it with her. And it had to do with cancer patients, and it had to do with, emotions and our happiness level and whatnot. And after the session was over, Jane took that and she thought about it, and it bothered her. She knew I wasn't directing it at her, but it triggered something in her. And so she went back and thought, well, let me review what had happened before cancer. What state was I in? Now, in the group at that time, we were talking about the different frequencies of our emotions. And I had said, if anybody wants the vibrational scale, let me know and I'll post it. So I had posted Abraham's vibrational scale, which is basically 2, and anyone can look it up. Like one is a funnel going in upward motion, and one is a funnel going in a downward motion. And on the funnel in an upward motion are all the positive feelings and the different frequencies of the positive feelings. And then on the negative side are all the negative emotions. So she was in the bath. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that before this, Jane had come with a lot of background in understanding the sciences. She's been a patient and client of Dr. Nasha. She went through the metabolic approach to cancer. Her current naturopath follows all of the things. She's a super clean eater. She meditates, she exercises, she plays, she's done all the things. And in that state of mind, when you look at it that way, you think it's all physical. And even though epigenetics is talked about, even though emotions are told, you're told in that sort of terrain-based approach to life, that emotions are important. But if emotions are 1 out of 10 and the other 9 things are physical, you're led to believe that the physical is still the driver. The physical is still the most important. Now, in my world, that is not how I believe. I believe the emotions are the number 1 most important driver. And if you heard a show from a couple weeks ago with Dr. Miriam Rahav, we talked about the 5 levels of healing. And Dr. Klinghardt put this handout together of a pyramid, and the physical is on the bottom. And then there are 4 other layers to this that are not physical. There's the mental body, the spiritual body, the emotional body. So when you look at it that way, only 1 out of 4 things are physical. But Jane wasn't ready yet to hear that, because most people aren't. Because I understand it's a stretch. I understand that when you live in a physical world, you think everything is physical related. And you have to have a degree of faith or experience or true resonance to take that leap of faith into that the emotional, mental, psychology, spiritual world has that much impact on how your body epigenetically expresses your genes and metabolizes life. So she's looking over this list. So back to, she was working with her doctor on her A1C, which is your blood sugar. And, Jane eats very clean, and she's done fasting, and she's done all the things, and she was on supplements, and her doctor was working with her in all the physical ways to try to get her A1C lower. And nothing was working. And she was frustrated because she didn't want to fast any more than she already was. And she didn't want to really make any more changes because she didn't feel like she needed to. But this was what her doctor was wanting her to do. So nothing's worked to make it any less. It's at an okay level, but they want it to be better. She's in the bathtub reviewing this vibrational emotional scale. And you'll hear from Jane. She'll be on the show. I just wanted to tell this story now, and we'll talk about her journey that she's doing with me to unlock any repressed emotions that she may be having about all kinds of things. But so we're in this Rewire program, and I've said this thing that's bothered her, that's made her reflect, and now she's looking at this list of emotions, and she's coming to Jesus and saying, holy crap, I was in frustration, resentment, anger. I was on the negative side of the vibrational scale for a long time. So she allowed herself to sort of break open, and she cried and had an emotional response to recognizing the pattern of what had built up to the expression of cancer. And after that happened, when she got up in the morning to test her blood sugar, it was lower. And it was the first time it had moved. She went to her doctor, they took blood work, and the only thing that had changed is her releasing emotion and sort of jumping into this spiritual, emotional connection to the body. And her doctor agreed. Her doctor 100% agreed, and she has blood work to prove that this has made a difference. Now, until we had that conversation, until she took time to really be honest and reflect back to the emotions that she was holding on to most of the time, most people aren't really self-aware. And I'm not saying, Jane, that you're not self-aware. I'm just saying that everyone, myself included, this story about me and the ex-boyfriend, I question myself all the time. I consider myself very highly emotionally intuitive, intelligent, and all the things, and I didn't even know that was there. We may believe and think one thing, but our subconscious, our unconscious is 88%. And I promise you there is stored stuff in there that you don't know about. And it may not come out any other way. It might be expressed, definitely observing your behaviors. I have another client who on one side feels very positive and disciplined and focused, but then you look at her behavior and she recognizes that her behavior and her thoughts about her behavior do not match. So what is that? Well, it's a bunch of fears. It's a bunch of deep-seated fears about a lot of things, and she hasn't done the core wound stuff yet, but we're going to do that. So when we're looking at a reality of a range of emotions where maybe before you would get triggered by something and now you're much better, you don't get triggered quite the same. And let's say it's something that brings up anger. I'll tell you, and I know a lot of you will feel this, I definitely know I still have anger. It's apparent to me. When I did a medicine journey on my own, the 3-gram journey, I did it because someone was coming to do one with me, and that was the talked about amount, and I had not done it myself, and so I wanted to do it. I wanted to see, and holy cow, the doors flew open, and what came up for me was stuff about my mom, was anger I've been holding on to about her not visiting, and I don't know if I've talked about this on the other shows or not, but here's a time to share. So I was broken open. I know it's there, but I wasn't allowing myself to let it out, and I wasn't trying to dig for it, but when it happened, I thought, wow, this is so good that this is coming out right now. And I didn't feel like I even took enough or I gave enough time So I wanted to go back in again later, which I did. And I did a little bit more, expecting that I was going to go back down that thread and that I was going to be guided to release more of those emotions. But what ended up happening was a completely different journey. This is what I love about this plant medicine, the one that I'm using, is that you think you know what's happening going in, but it's a different agenda. It's whatever needs to come out. When we talk about Ashley's journey was she had one expectation, I had an expectation, but her path was different. But it was needed to happen the way it happened because it's changed how she is in the world right now. And like I mentioned, I think last week, as I had checked in with her, she went from an anxiety level of 12 out of 10 back to 4. She's at 4. And I know with the practices that we talked about and the things that she's going to incorporate and start doing and getting childcare, that 4 can get back down to a 2 or to a 3. And it's just being in check with and being shown the things underneath the surface that you may not connect with. So I'll give you one other story. In a past relationship, I had experienced dealing with anger. And I grew up in a house where there isn't a lot of anger. My mother is more worried. My dad would probably be considered someone who worries also. His isn't as, you can't really see it as much as you can in my mother. And it's extremely palpable for her and her anxiety level. But I'm not used to anger. And so the first time I encountered being around a lot of anger, it's very confronting. It taps into my own anger. It's very draining. It is really intense. And then so I had to learn how to be with it. And at one point in time, I said something about, why are you so angry? And my response was, through anger, I'm not angry. In fact, one of the cancer patients that I had a session with when I first started my relationship with Dr. Nasha, this woman had come to me and I asked her, did you watch the video with Nasha and I? And she said, yes. And I said, so why are you here? And she said, well, I've done therapy before, but I think you're onto something different. I said, great. So let's do this kind of work. And so as I was allowing her to explain her situation and her past, what came up was a lot of conversations about her mother and her anger towards her mother. Now, as she's delivering this story to me, and she talked for about 20 to 25 minutes and told me this whole story, I kept hearing themes of angry at the world, still angry at her mother, victimized by the world and what's going on, from chemicals, from mindset, from medical things. I just heard the resentment, the anger, the fear, the victimization, the wanting to rebel against everything. So I waited for her to be done, and I asked very gently. I said, okay. So, well, can I reflect back something that I heard? And she said, sure. And I said, I still hear some anger. And she literally said, I'm not angry. And I thought, okay, so here we go. So here's someone who can talk about the anger, but isn't aware that she still has anger. Same thing in one of my last relationships. There was a situation of a wall being punched, and to him, that was anger. And I'm like, no, that's rage. When you live with anger, when you live with anxiety, when you live with sadness, that's your normal. So you don't understand or know a different frequency unless it gets more intense or less intense. But because your frequency, the parents that you came from, the heritage, the lineage, the situation, the religion, all the trials and tribulations, this has created how you react to the world and where you vibrate, what your frequency is, which is your emotion. To you, that's normal. So you don't know if it's I'm holding on to anger or I'm holding on to depression, sadness, anxiety, and worry and fear of the world. Most people have so much fear, they don't recognize that they're afraid of everything. They're afraid of what's in the water. They're afraid of what people are going to do. They're afraid of everything. And think about that for a second. If that resonates with you, are you afraid of everything? Is everything you do underneath it driven by something going wrong and therefore I have to plan ahead? Because that's driven by fear, right? So we're either, one of the characters that we're discussing right now and that we're working on this week in Awaken Your Dream Life is the one that is about intuition and about spiritual, like everything is connected. And we talked about this with Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor when she had her stroke. Her left brain kind of went offline for a while. So she lived in her right brain. And while the right brain isn't terribly functional, it's a happy place to be. It's a much more enjoyable quality of life, which we have access to every day, but we often don't use it. We often don't live in it because it isn't necessarily functional. And I don't mean that in a broad sense, because it is, because if you live from that part of your brain, these different parts of the characters that we talk about in Awaken Your Dream Life, you will be more productive, you will be happier, you will manifest better things, because that's where you're the highest frequency when you are connected to all that is. When you feel separate and disconnected and your story and what is becomes the focus of your conversation and what you talk about, you are disconnected. You feel victimized. You feel a lack and scarcity of time, of money, of love, of connection, of possibility. And when you're in the other characters, that isn't even a situation because you're so present that you aren't in any way worrying about anything. So this conversation has been started, and I really, really appreciated Jane gave me permission to share her story with you today, because one of the things I said, not to her, but to somebody else, was that even though you may not think you have, like I may say to you, I sense fear, and you go, no, I don't feel afraid. And that might be because 2 years ago, a year ago, you were more afraid. And you can see the difference that the reduction of intensity has been for you. So you feel like, oh, before I was afraid and now I'm not afraid. But it's just that you just reduce the amount of fear, but the fear is still there. Just like I know for me, I definitely have some anger. And I'm looking forward to allowing space to have it come out. And I probably have some fear too. Of course, we all have it. But I want to invite you to consider that just because you don't resonate with something doesn't mean it's not true. Because some of the beliefs and feelings that you have, like when I would tap with people and do tapping, I tap with people to get to the root of the fear. And I remember taking someone who didn't really, and again, we didn't know, it's a process. Like we start at the top and we deal with what is right now. And then I kind of use the core wound work and I kind of dig a little deeper until I find what I think is the root. And I remember saying, part of it's intuitive for me, but part of it is also having some information. But I said to them, are you afraid that you're never going to get what you want? And when I said that, they burst into tears, and that was the root. But most of us can't get there without some help. And again, after experiencing what I've experienced with this plant medicine, and not all of them, I'm pretty settled on what I have. I think it's magic. I think it's the portal to what's going on inside of you. And I think it's almost necessary if on a healing journey, especially if you have a feeling of fear about anything. If you don't feel safe in the world, and that's something that I don't think I talked about last week, but I talked about it at Awaken Your Dream Life. At the end of the day with this epigenetic conversation and Dr. Bruce Lipton and going through the weekend, one of the things that got really stressed was that you cannot heal if you don't feel safe in the world or in your body. And I didn't realize, or I don't realize, how many people don't feel safe because of what has happened to you. And again, there's no shame or blame in this. You've come into this life to experience and to work some stuff out. All right. So your life path that you've chosen before you got here said, I'm going to meet with this person. They're going to do something really bad to me so I can learn how to forgive. And the journey I'm going to take is going to get me here to elevate my expansion and my family's expansion. Then I'm going to be able to give back to other people and finish my life out in this way or not. Or maybe I'm going to manifest that I transition earlier to help other people learn their lessons. Whatever your soul contracts are, none of it is good, none of it is bad, it just is. And knowing this information, understanding that you have a whole world of emotions underneath the things you can hear, that 12% of your brain, the things that you think about, the things that when someone says, oh, are you afraid of that? Or maybe you're a little bit angry. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I can feel their anger. And then when I reflect that back, literally with anger, go, I'm not angry. They're defensive. I'm like, okay. So that, if we don't take care of that, we can't heal. So all of this to say that there are feelings hiding beneath the surface. I promise you. And honestly, if they're not causing you any problems, then no one's going to care and no one's going to do anything about it. But if you can't heal, if you are struggling in relationship, if you're struggling financially, if you don't know what your life purpose is, if you have anxiety, if you're afraid of everything, then I invite you to consider doing something about it, because I promise that you're going to learn something you didn't know. And I currently and again, can you do this without medicine, plant medicine? Yes. And it might take longer. It might take more repetition. It might take literally changing everything about your life, pulling yourself out of your current circumstances and changing everything, like quitting your job, leaving your home, moving somewhere else where you're remote or whatever. Like seriously, if you read Radical Remission, many of the people in Radical Remission who left the doctor and said, I'm done, I'm not doing any more of the things that you're telling me to do, literally went and like quit their job and lived on the roof and played music and literally checked out of their regular life. They made a full 180-degree pivot from their life, which then caused them to feel better in many ways. Did they need plant medicine to do it? No. But if you want to keep a semblance of your same life and you aren't willing to let go of the things that you may or may not realize are causing and creating this environment where you're angry, you're anxious, you have a lack of trust, you're not connected to all that is, you're not even connected to yourself. I look at it as, so I'm in a couple of weeks from now, I will air another episode that I did with Shauna Home and her second book after Ishil Wisdom, because that was where she did a plant medicine journey every month for 12 months. And each chapter is each one of the journeys and kind of going through the lessons and the things that got uncovered for her. And while that, and I don't know that she does them regularly anymore, and we discussed why she felt called to do one a month for 12 months. I don't necessarily think that's, necessary, but that's what she was called to do. And it took her on a great journey. And it's a really interesting book, but I think it's a good check-in. I think it's a good check-in with our bodies to say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything that I'm repressing that I don't know about? Because here's the thing about your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is unconscious. You can't connect to it consciously. That's the point. So being able to use something to help you get there. I just want to stress that this for me is this is about diving deep into what needs to be healed before my physical body is telling me that it needs to be healed. It's being able to understand that we hold things that we are not aware of. And how do I find it? And this stuff is like magic. I love it. I think it's super important. And I feel that's really uncomfortable for me to say as someone who for my whole life, and even when this stuff started to happen, I had judgment and opinions, negative opinions. It's not an addictive thing where you do it all the time. You don't live on this. This is a journey. This is a taking time for yourself. This is no different than, in some ways, going on a retreat, going on a personal retreat or a yoga retreat or a meditation retreat or a silent retreat. This is just going to get there faster, potentially. So, and again, there's other ways. There's breath work and other techniques that you can do. But for anyone who feels at all like maybe that there's stuff underneath there because you are having a hard time. You're having a hard time understanding what things to do differently. So I have my 2 ways, well, kind of 3, that I can offer you. And the first one, of course, is on a time schedule. It's the Sacred Shamanic Ceremony with Christian. And San Pedro was very gentle for me, but my intention going in was very different. I was looking for whatever was going to happen. I was completely open. I didn't have anything but I was guided to have an intention. So I had an intention. That intention came forward, and I learned something very valuable that I will never forget and that has changed me. And I don't know that I need to revisit it, quite honestly. So I think the one and done for me, or maybe one time in the near future to see how I would embody the energy that came out of my body in a different way, like that's a way I would revisit it. But when I look at what form of mushroom that I've been using, it was created for an internal expression, not for an external, altered vision. It was for internal work, and it's exactly what it does. So this is just to get you on board in some way, shape, or form, whether when someone's coming to do it with me, there's a couple criteria. One, I really prefer to do it with people who listen to the show and that I probably already work with, because it's not just, it's taking the lessons learned and embodying what to do next about it. Like following Ashley's journey, I gave her a whole bunch of stuff to do afterwards, as well as we prepped beforehand. And having that whole package experience was really important to make real change. And, I don't want people to take pharmaceutical drugs. I don't want you to be on anxiety medication. When I look at the fact that people are on pharmaceutical drugs and think that's okay. And I'm not saying this is just me, okay? I'd rather you take plant medicine, which is literally from from plants that doesn't have synthetic crap in it, that isn't going to kill your liver and kidney because you take it for years and years and years, versus taking something that numbs you, something that represses you. No. So this is where I've sort of crossed over into this world and have a goal I will share with all of you. And I'll plant this seed now. My goal, my dream would be great to build and facilitate a retreat center here near me and to do this work plus others. And if any of you watch, or any of you have Hulu accounts, there's a show that Stephanie introduced me to called 9 Perfect Strangers. Now, that show I would not want to repeat because the people coming to that retreat don't know her. Nicole Kidman plays the retreat leader. And the weird thing about it is that she picks these people and researches them, but they know nothing about her. And of course, that would never happen. I want it to be the reverse. I want you coming, trusting me, knowing the depth at which we're going to work, and committing to wanting to get better, feel better, be better, release everything and anything that you have that's holding you back from anything. That's what I want. So anyone interested in the future, whether you attend or want to be an investor, I will let you know when I start seriously researching and looking at land, because I'm excited about this work. It's just another extension of what I'm already doing. So then the other thing to start doing is to also know your core wounds. So the next rewiring program happens in March. And I'll just preface, so last year you heard me talk about the 6-month deep dive. And the year before that, and the year before that was the Empowerment Strategist program. And I created the Rewire as a way to get people in who weren't ready to commit to 6 months. So that is still the case. I've got the 3-month Rewiring Your Core Wound Patterns program. And that is the same price it was last year. It won't change. However, if you've heard, especially in the beta group, they all wanted more because we just got started. And I believe that 3 months still isn't enough time to really make real lasting change. So the longer you do it, the better results you have. So there is a second half to that called Evolving Beyond Your Story. I'm only telling you all that, so anyone who's interested, it is a 6-month program, and anyone signing up for all 6 months will get a very nice deal on the whole 6 months versus just the first 3 months and then wait till the end to decide if you want to do the second 3 months. So Rewiring Your Core Wound Pattern will start in March. It will be 3 months. At the end of Rewiring Your Core Wound Patterns, we'll start Evolving Beyond Your Story. And I'll have details about, and whoever wants to apply, I'll have the details about what curriculum we cover and what's included. What will be included in doing both programs the entire 6 months will be either a VIP day or a small group retreat, which is what the 6-month deep dive members did last year. That was Patrick and Danielle and Cammie and Becky. And that was truly like the beginning of what made me think I really want to do a retreat center, because the emotional work we did there was big. And it was the start of realizing that there's so much more to do and to hold this kind of space for people and to allow them to work through their stuff and to use the tools that I'm using now with that to really make that neurological change, to really induce a high level of neuroplasticity. So you literally walk out kind of a different person. Now, the Rewiring Your Core Wound Pattern program is also just 3 months, so you don't have to sign up for all 6 months, but I'm just letting you know now that there will be an option to extend that will include many great things, a VIP day or a group event, and a ticket to the next live event, which will be announced later this year. So those are the options, guys. And I would really encourage you to be an observer of your life, be an observer of your reactions, be an observer of your results. And rather than decide that you don't think you're angry or you don't think you're afraid, just observe. Now, from there, I want you to get curious and I want you to know your core wound map, which is what we do in the Rewire. So that way, anytime you're triggered, anytime you're upset, anytime anything upsets you and you react, you can go back and say, oh, that's why. Oh, and here's what I do about it. Oh, and here's how I change it. Because that's the name of the game here. So just because you don't necessarily resonate with a thought or a feeling or a belief doesn't mean it doesn't live inside of you. And I don't want to scare you with that. I just want to share that because I think it's really important. I think it's really important that we don't wait until stuff gets too bad and the physical body is yelling at you I think it's really important to proactively go in searching for the things that your body wants to tell you and use whatever methods you're willing to use to get there. See you next week.